Following its narrow escape from the Battle of the Falkland Islands, the German light cruiser SMS Dresden, along with a few supporting vessels, ventured into the Pacific Ocean. Their objective was to continue disrupting Allied maritime operations through commerce raiding. While these efforts did not significantly impede shipping activities in the region, they nevertheless posed a challenge to the British, who were forced to allocate resources to track and counter the German cruiser. However, the fate of the German light cruiser has already been written in stone. Dresden was a German light cruiser built for the Kaiserliche Marine, or the Imperial German Navy. The lead ship of her class of two light cruisers, her sister ship being the well-known raider, the SMS Emden. Dresden was 118.3 meters long overall, with a beam of 13.5 meters and a draft of 5.53 meters forward. She had a displacement of 3,668 metric tons, as designed, and up to 4,268 tons at full load. The ship had a minimal superstructure, which consisted of a small conning tower and bridge structure. Her hull had a raised forecastle and quarterdeck, along with a pronounced ram bow. She was fitted with two pole masts, and she had a crew of 18 officers and 343 enlisted men. Her propulsion system consisted of two Paris steam turbines, which drove a pair of screw propellers. Steam was provided by 12 coal-fired water tube boilers that were vented through 3 funnels. The propulsion system was designed to give 15,000 metric horsepower for a top speed of 24 knots. Dresden carried up to 860 tons of coal, which gave her a range of 3,600 nautical miles at 14 knots. The ship was armed with a main battery of 10 10.5 centimeter SKL-40 guns and single pivot mounts. 2 were placed side by side forward of the forecastle, 6 were located on the broadside, 3 on either side, and 2 were placed side by side aft. The guns could engage targets out to 12,200 meters, and they were supplied with around 1,500 rounds of ammunition for about 150 shells per gun. The secondary battery consisted of 8 5.2 centimeter SKL-55 guns, with 4,000 rounds of ammunition. She was also equipped with 2 45 centimeter torpedo tubes, with 2 torpedoes more for each torpedo tube, with both torpedo mounts mounted on her deck. The ship was protected by a curved armored deck that was up to 80 mm or 3.1 inches thick. It sloped downward at the sides of the hull to provide defense against incoming fire. The sloped portion was 50 mm thick. The conning tower had 100 mm thick sides, and the guns were protected by 50 mm thick gun shields. The Dresden's early years were marked by a series of mishaps and deployments. Laid down in 1906 and launched in 1907 by the Blum and Voss Shipbuilding Company in Hamburg, Germany, her initial sea trials were plagued by accidents, including a collision that sank a Swedish vessel and turbine malfunctions that delayed her readiness. Despite these setbacks, she participated in the Hudson-Fulton celebration in New York in 1909, representing Germany. Upon joining the High Seas Fleet, Dresden engaged in routine peacetime activities, including fleet exercises and training cruises. However, she experienced another collision in 1910, requiring further repairs. Notably, she earned recognition for her gunnery skills, winning the Kaiser Shooting Prize. In 1913, she served in the Mediterranean Division before being reassigned to the North American station amidst the Mexican Revolution. In 1914, Dresden's mission shifted to protecting German interests in Mexico. She became involved in the complex political situation, rescuing citizens and even confiscating a merchant ship to transport refugees. The ship also played a role in delivering arms to the Herta regime, despite a U.S. embargo. As tensions escalated in Europe, Dresden's orders changed. Initially scheduled for an overhaul in Germany, she was instead directed to prepare for a trade war in the Atlantic. This transition marked the beginning of her wartime service, moving from diplomatic duties to naval conflict. Following orders to operate in the Atlantic, Dresden, under Captain of the Sea Fritz Ludeck, headed south, maintaining radio silence. Upon learning of Britain's declaration of war, Ludeck chose the South Atlantic as his operational area, intercepting British merchant ships. Early on, he would adhere to the Hague Convention, allowing a ship to proceed when its captain claimed ignorance of the war. However, he would later capture and sink several vessels, including the SS Hades and the SS Homewood, while gathering supplies from German colliers and steamers. Engine troubles plagued Dresden, forcing Ludeck to halt for repairs at Host Island. During this time, he received news of heavy merchant traffic off South America's western coast and decided to shift operations. After passing through the Strait of Magellan, Dresden encountered a French steamer, but refrained from attacking as it fled into neutral waters. Upon reaching the Juan Fernandez Islands, Dresden established radio contact with the light cruiser Leipzig. Finding limited success against British shipping, Dresden joined Vice Admiral Maximilian von Spee's East Asia Squadron at Easter Island. Dresden, along with other ships of the East Asia Squadron, then proceeded to the South American coast. They met with auxiliary and merchant vessels before arriving off at Vespucio. Spee, upon receiving intelligence of a British cruiser at Coronel, this being the HMS Glasgow, planned an ambush. However, he was unaware that the HMS Glasgow was part of a larger British squadron, including the armored cruisers Monmouth and Good Hope. On the 1st of November 1914, Admiral Spee's East Asia Squadron engaged a British 4th Cruiser Squadron at the Battle of Coronel. Dresden participated by firing on the auxiliary cruiser Otranto, forcing it to retreat and then shifting its fire to the light cruiser Glasgow, inflicting damage. After the battle, Dresden and the other German cruisers searched for the retreating British ships, but were unsuccessful. Dresden emerged from the engagement unscathed. Following the victory, Spee took a squadron back to Vespucio for provisioning, while Dresden and Leipzig remained at Massa Furia with the squadron's colliers. After Spee's return, Dresden and Leipzig were sent to Vespucio to resupply. The squadron then regrouped and anchored in St. Quentin Bay to refuel. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy dispatched a powerful force, including battle cruisers and armored cruisers, to hunt down Spee's squadron. On November 26th, the German squadron left St. Quentin Bay, heading for the Atlantic. They captured a Canadian sailing ship carrying coal, which they unloaded into their auxiliaries. On December 6th, Spee held a council to discuss their next move. Spee, supported by the captains of Scharnhorst and Eisenhower, advocated for an attack on the Falkland Islands to destroy the British wireless station and coal stocks. However, Ludeck and the captains of Leipzig and Nuremberg opposed this plan, preferring to bypass the Falklands and continue raiding British shipping in the La Plenty area. This decision would prove to be a devastating one. On December 6th, Spee's squadron headed toward the Falkland Islands, arriving on the 7th of December. Upon approaching Port Stanley, they discovered a much larger British squadron preparing for action. Spee immediately ordered a retreat, but the British pursued. Spee then ordered his light cruisers, including Dresden, to escape south, while he engaged the British with his armored cruisers. Dresden, with their superior speed, was the only German warship to escape the ensuing Battle of the Falkland Islands, where the entire East Asia Squadron, except for Dresden, would be defeated and sunk with heavy loss of life. Following the Battle of the Falkland Islands, Dresden sought refuge in the islands of South America to secure coal supplies. On December 9th, she returned to the Pacific, anchoring in Shoal Bay with minimal coal. Lieutenant Wilhelm Cairns managed to secure permission to refuel, allowing Dresden to reach Punta Arenas. There, she replenished her coal supply. The Admiral Steb hoped that she could return to Germany, but her engine's condition prevented this. Ludeck then planned to cross the Pacific, raiding commerce in the Indian Ocean. Dresden continued to gather coal and supplies, capturing a British barge along the way. The German liner, Syria Cordoba, provided critical support, supplying Dresden with coal and accompanying her to the Juan Fernandez Islands. This continued support allowed the vessel to remain at sea for several months. By March 8, 1915, however, Dresden, grappling with dwindling supplies and in need of repairs, sought refuge. Ludeck made the strategic decision to conceal his vessel in Cumberland Bay, near the neutral Tierra island. Opting to resupply in a neutral harbor provided an advantage. The possibility of interning the ship if it were to be discovered by hostile forces. In their relentless pursuit, British naval units were intercepting and deciphering coded wireless communication among the German fleet. Despite having access to the captured German codebooks, decoding these messages was challenging due to the periodically changing keys. However, Charles Sedward, a British signal officer, successfully decoded a message indicating Dresden's rendezvous with the Clayler at Juan Fernandez on March 9th. A British squadron, comprising the cruisers HMS Kent and HMS Glasgow, along with the auxiliary cruiser Arama, would eventually locate the Dresden. The discovery was partly due to the German sailors participating in a football match ashore, which revealed their presence. On March 14th, in a strategic move, the British ships cornered Dresden within the neutral bay, setting the stage for a confrontation. HMS Glasgow would initiate the battle by opening fire on the Dresden, causing significant damage and setting the vessel aflame. The Dresden was hopelessly outgunned and outnumbered. Stranded in the bay with depleted coal reserves and failing engines, the situation quickly turned dire for the German cruiser. Realizing the fatality of their position, Captain Ludeck made the critical decision to scuttle the ship. As the British cruisers continued their assault, the German crew desperately abandoned the Dresden in open boats, seeking refuge on the neutral island. In the chaos, it remains unclear whether the final explosion of the Dresden was a result of the continued British shelling or scuttling charges set by the Germans themselves. In the aftermath, the British forces were ordered to capture any survivors from the wreckage. Most of the ship's crew managed to escape. Only 8 men were killed in the attack, with another 29 wounded. The British auxiliary cruiser HMS Arama took 15 severely wounded men to the spear sail, 4 of which would die. The destruction of the ship had left Ludeck in shock, and so Canaris took responsibility for the fate of the ship's crew. They would remain on the island for 5 days, until 2 Chilean warships brought a German passenger ship to take the men to Coronel Island, where they were interned for the duration of the war. Canaris escaped from the internment camp on the 5th of August 1915, and reached Germany exactly 2 months later. On the 31st of March 1917, a small group of men escaped on the Chilean barge Tinto. The voyage back to Germany lasted 120 days. The rest of the crew did not return to Germany until 1920. The wreck of Dresden lies at a depth of 70 meters. In 2002, the first survey of the wreck was done by a team led by James P. Delgado for the Sea Hunters documentary produced by the National Underwater and Marine Agency. The team included the archaeologist Dr. Willy Kramer, the first German to visit the wreck since she sank 88 years before. Dresden lies on her starboard side, pointing north toward the beach. The wreck is heavily damaged. Much of the upper works, including the bridge, the masts, the funnels, and many of the guns have been torn from the ship. The bow is cut off by the scuttling charges detonated by the ship's crew, and sits upright on the sea floor. The stern is also badly damaged, with the main deck blasted away and many shell holes in the ship's side. Some of the damage to the aft of the ship appears to have been done by an undocumented salvage operation before Delgado's survey. According to German records, Dresden was carrying gold coins from their colony at Quindago. Delgado speculated that this salvage work was an attempt to retrieve these. In 1926, the ship's compass and several flags were recovered and returned to Germany, where they were held at the German Naval Academy in Frensburg-Merwick. In 2006, Chilean and German divers found and recovered Dresden's bell, which is now in Germany. C.S. Foster's 1929 novel, Brown on Resolution, and two subsequent movies, were inspired by the Dresden's escape and subsequent destruction. The sinking of the Dresden in neutral Chilean waters sparked controversy and raised questions of international law. The German consulate in Chile protested against the British action, arguing that it constituted a violation of international law by attacking an enemy combatant in a neutral territory. This incident highlighted the complexities of naval warfare and the inadequacies of neutrality during wartime. The Battle of Más was more than just a naval skirmish. It signified the end of the German East Asia Squadron's presence in the Pacific Ocean. The battle's outcome and the subsequent diplomatic tensions it provoked illustrated the broader impacts of World War I and the delicate balance of international relations during this period. The events at Cumberland Bay not only shaped the course of naval warfare, but also set precedents in the conduct of war and the interpretation of neutrality. With that, this video does come to a close. Thank you all for watching. If you guys did enjoy, please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and I will see you all in the next one.